It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody. Where each week we seek inspiration from great men and women to become the heroes and heroines of our own lives. And you are here with your hosts. I am Andrew Bernstein. You are Robert Begley. How you doing today, Robert?
I am unbelievable, Andy. Excited to plunge into some of the 15 million words written by this giant of the Enlightenment.
Absolutely right. We are talking, of course, about Francois Marie Arouet, known more popularly as Voltaire, right? 1694 to 1778. In his 83 plus years, he did write voluminously. He is a brilliant writer and a stand-up guy for all kinds of, principles of liberty, which we'll discuss. And since we're going back into France, I guess, today I am once again Andre and you are Robert.
I will be Robert for today. Okay, That's it. I've exhausted my knowledge of French.
We monsieur. I've just exhausted.
Okay, yes. So, Andy, some themes for today: darkness versus enlightenment. Darkness being the age-old ideas, whether it's slavery, whether it is religious intolerance, superstition versus enlightenment. And he was clearly a giant of the Enlightenment era. When you speak out like that, you tend to get either jailed or executed. And what do? Can you turn that around into something productive? Well, out of the 15 million words, many of those were written in the Bastille in France and in England, which he absolutely loved. We're going to go into detail about that. And humor, you mentioned, he poked fun at everyone, and it was often to make a point. And we'll cover some of his humor about some of the leading thinkers, about some of the leading traditions. But Andy, he just challenged the status quo. These kinds of people, they come along, once a century. And the 18th century, there's a reason Will Durant, who we covered in the Hero Show, called it the age of Voltaire.
And here it is in all 900 pages. Mine's a little worn. You can see the cover's torn off. But this is the age of Voltaire, the Story of Civilization, Volume 9. And Durant is right. Voltaire is a superstar of the Enlightenment, so much so that Durant says Italy had the Renaissance, Germany had the Reformation, France had Voltaire. He was a one-man. He was a one-man period.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing life, Andy. So, you mentioned 1694 he's born. I think one of 5 children. His father was a lawyer, wanted him to go into law. That was his profession. But since he's like 10 years old, Voltaire just loved to write, starts writing poems and plays, and thinks he can make money at it. And eventually, I think, Andy, he was not too many people before Voltaire made a living, was a commercial success with, just simply by the written word. So we definitely give him credit for that, from his youth. And
he made money. He made money as a writer, dramatist and other forms, and he invested wisely. So, Voltaire became a wealthy man.
He became a wealthy man, And one reason you said invested wisely, when his father died, I think he was like only in his 20s. Voltaire was when his father died. He inherited a portion of that estate and invested wisely. He invested in it's interesting. He was like a pacifist, I think, and he invested in weapons that can help the military win, better. Like that was one of the things that he invested in, but continued his writing career and then started to ruffle some feathers. And I think he's still in his 20s.
Ruffled a lot of feathers. Yeah, he was in the Bastille for almost a year when he was in his early 20s.
10-foot walls, 10-foot thick walls, no windows. Just fortunately, you know, 50, 60 years later, he would have gotten his head chopped off. But he just wrote. He used those 11 months to write various plays and poems and critiques of the culture.
Right.
So he put that time to use, Andy.
Yep. There's a classic case of life gives you lemons, you make
Yeah.
lemonade. Voltaire, 1694. So the second time he's in the Bastille, he's locked up. Well, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to be a free thinker under a
Yes.
repressive authoritarian regime. You
Yes.
know, and the French, the ancient regime in France was brutally repressive. That's which is big reason why the French Revolution was so bloody. It's centuries of brutal repression. You can understand the commoners were just enraged by which is understandable. But so I think Voltaire proposes to the authorities, just exile me, and kick me out of the country. So they exile him. He goes to England, and you're right. He's an Anglophile. He's very impressed by the the greater freedom in Britain.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's some rumor here that's at least possible that Voltaire attended the funeral of Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton, who we said was the greatest human being who ever lived. He was a gigantic Newton, Locke. He just loved the British tradition of thinkers. Alexander Pope, and it was amazing. Yeah, Anglophile is the word. It's a proper word, especially when France and England are, by this time they're into like 500 years of fighting each other, 500 or 600 since 1066 up to the 1720, 1730s.
Yeah, they even fought a war named the 100 Years' War.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not easy to say this about your, what's supposed to be your arch enemy, but he loved the best English thinkers.
Yes, absolutely right. Shows great independence on Voltaire's part, that he can overcome, the animosity of nationalism here, and he brings that English commitment to individual liberty and freedom of the mind. Right, he brings that back to France, and he's got to fight the ancient regime, and it's dangerous.
It is dangerous. And in many ways, Andy, we can call the ancient regime, especially because it's so ancient. That is a darkness element. Okay, that is in the past where faith and force dominate, and the British heroes we just mentioned, and now add Voltaire. This is what Enlightenment is. It's pro-reason, pro-science, pro-progress, pro-liberty. All of these things are they're not limited now to England. That's one of the things. Voltaire was such a giant on the European continent. Yeah. He wasn't just limited to France. I mean, his impact was major. And that, as you said, so now he's starting to come out and challenge.
He was a conduit. He was a magnificent conduit of English liberty to France, and then more broadly on the continent.
Yeah, exactly. One of the ways he gets his point across, he has a gathering with all these different types of religious people, and he purposely has the foods that they're banned from eating, so the pork with the Muslims, and he's like, you guys, come on, you're really going to tell me that this thing, you're going to pray, you're not going to pray to that cow, but you're going to pray to the cow's God. Same thing with the fish. He goes into the, during Lent, he talks about how, some poor guy eats a bit of horse's flesh during Lent, he's going to burn in hell. But meanwhile, the rich popes and all these guys, they have this fillet of fish, and they're absolved. So he's unpacking.
Yeah, and they're having orgies in the Vatican too, which I don't think is supposed to happen. But they're not going to burn in hell. They're bringing the courtesans, and everything.
So by having these kinds of examples where he's reducing these two absurdities, there's a logical reductio ad absurdum, but poking fun in a way that it's humorous how he's doing this. I mean, he's just showing the hypocrisy and So that's one method. Later in his life, Voltaire, he's wealthy. He's writing thousands and thousands of letters. I think more than 20,000. Many of them are pseudonymous, like he's using false names. This is so Voltaire. He writes a lot of this stuff gets published in pamphlets, and then people will critique his points, then he'll write with another pseudonym to critique their critique and clarify his point. It's like this guy will outwit you, he will use every brain cell he has to get his point across.
And I think he has a few.
He has a few. So he moves to this border town, Ferney, and builds an estate. It's the border of France and Switzerland. And he stays true to his colors. Whenever he pisses off the French authorities, he stays on the Swiss side of his estate. Whenever he pisses off the Swiss authorities, he stays on the French side of his estate. So even the way he lives his life, there's like a comic, just a comic element to it there.
That is comic. It's also prudent.
Yes. That's better than the Bastille. That's for sure,
when you've been incarcerated twice, and not just incarcerated, but the Bastille, which is a hellish place, like you said, sunless, 10 feet thick concrete walls. He's incarcerated twice in the Bastille. He's been exiled, from France. Even when he returned, I think the king didn't allow him in Paris for a while, right? He had to come back. He had to lobby, to get back to his beloved Paris. And so it's prudent. Live right on the border. Oh, here come the gendarmes. Out the back.
And just talking about his influence, Victor Hugo, you and John covered him on the Heroes show a couple of years ago. Shoshana and with Shoshana, Hugo has this brilliant quote. He says, "Jesus wept, Voltaire laughed." And that just captures, that captures this great man. Two more quick points for me, Andy. One is historical events. There was a gigantic earthquake in Lisbon that killed thousands and thousands of lives, caused incredible damage. And this really shook the European mindset that
it caused a tremendous tidal wave, right? That came in to swamp large parts of Lisbon.
And this made people question, how can a benevolent God cause this? And Voltaire
they needed an earthquake to raise that question after European history. How about the bubonic plague? A few centuries before that.
Well, So the main thing, though, so first Voltaire writes a poem about it, but more importantly, his single lasting work. Most people, myself included, I read many times his famous work of Candide, which came out of that event. And the story of Candide, actually, we should even bring up Leibniz, his concept of the best of all possible worlds.
I don't know what world he was looking at, but he was a mathematician, let us not forget.
You're right. Exactly. He's in the world of geometry, and he's allowed to go into Plato's world.
The world of the Pythagoreans, world of numbers, Plato's world of ideas. In fairness to Leibniz, he was a brilliant mathematician who concurrently, independently, he and Newton both developed calculus, independently.
So Candide, the story is it's just fabulous, because this man Candide, he travels around the world and he just witnesses all the, whether it's natural or man-made debacles. He's not as optimistic. In fact, the subtitle, I think, is optimism, and that is the main character, Dr. Pangloss, is the one who is the Leibniz best. This is the best of all possible worlds. And after Candide travels around the world and just witnesses all of these disasters, he goes back home to tend to his garden. And that's a poignant ending, and here's the independence that Voltaire stands for. He's like, you know, whatever else is going on out there, take care of your own garden. That's the
Yeah.
way to a happy life. Okay.
Right.
Don't worry about all these other worlds and stuff.
Right.
And that speaks to me, Andy. That is
Yeah.
such a profound message. And I'll say, I'll let you jump in a second, but even we covered Neil Peart and Rush, their final album, Clockwork Angels, the last song is called The Garden. And it just comes right out of Candide, that it's like, take care of your own garden. And that is the way to be happy in life, independent and happy in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely good point. I just want to say a couple of things. I love Candide also. In fairness to Leibniz, his claim, he did not deny all of these horrors that went on in the world. I mean, and nor did he deny that they were horrible. He didn't say, well, this is all good, in God's view or something. What he did say was this was the best world, the best of all possible worlds, the best world God could have created. That is, any other alternatives would have been worse. I don't know how, that's a faith-based belief. I don't know, besides, it undermines belief that God's all powerful, because if God's all powerful, he could have created any type of world he wanted. He could have created a world without the bubonic plague and without terrible earthquakes and tidal waves and so on. Anyway, Voltaire, but the brilliance of, and Voltaire's been accused of misunderstanding Leibniz for that reason. But I don't think so. I think Voltaire gets it. Because he's simply pointing out the world's got all these horrible things in it, no doubt. Look, there's any number of empirical examples. Look out at the observable world. He said, but that need not prevent us from self-actualizing, if I put this in Aristotle's words, right? When he talks at the end about cultivate your own garden, I take that to mean, your own life. Focus on your own life, self-develop, self-realize. I'm putting an Aristotelian interpretation on this, but I think it fits. You actualize your potential. Be the best you can be as a rational being, as a human being, and you can focus on yourself. The world, in some ways, the world bleeps. Not always. There's a lot of good people in the world, and good, good things happen. But there's a lot of tragedy, and worse, there's a lot of atrocities. You just look what Putin's doing right now
But Andy, that's the point. That's the message for today. Like, that's the carry out, because there is so much today that is going on, but a lot of it we don't have direct control over. But we fret about it and we let it all become all consuming.
Right.
And here's where we go to Voltaire and say, no, cultivate your own garden. That's you
right.
That
absolutely right. And so for me personally, I always wanted to be a writer. So I try, tune out, watch the news, because it's depressing. Sometimes
are you up to 15 million words yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
but I lock myself in my cubby hole here. I turn off the phone. I ignore the emails. I lock the doors, and I just focus on the books and essays that I want to write. And that, and I'm cultivating my own garden in that way, in a way that's distinctively right for me. Not everybody wants to be a writer, but butcher, baker, candlestick maker. You want to rear a family of healthy, happy children. You want a fulfilling and deep romantic relationship. You want to start your own company. What you want to get a black belt in taekwondo. You want to get yourself in tremendous physical condition. You want to read. You want to read all 11 volumes of Will Durant's Story of Civilization from cover to cover, whatever it is. You focus on your own values and on your own life, and you self-develop. You don't ignore, or deny the horrors that go on in the world, all the good things and the good people in the world. But you focus on yourself. You don't let the bad things. I mean, sometimes you got to, there's war. War ravages your town or something. At times it's inescapable. But for the most part, you could concentrate on yourself and don't let the horrors in the world just distract you or deflect you. And I had a person, I won't mention names here, a person who was very dear to me. You met her, Robert, was tormented by all the horrors that go on in the world. Just, she had a very sensitive soul. She was tormented by it. And drugs and alcohol were her way of self-medicating, and
Mm,
then she eventually died at a very young age from an overdose.
mm.
I could
Yeah, it's
understand.
awful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can understand. You have a sensitive soul. You respond to all the horrors that go on, and there's plenty of them. But Voltaire, I think Voltaire's alternative is much better.
Hmm.
You can
Yeah,
still focus on you. You can still focus on yourself.
mhm. And it comes back, Andy, to the power of literature. You know, he wrote in every aspect of, you know, poems, plays, now Candide is like a novella. I don't even know if the novel form was out in his era, but
Yeah,
dramatizing a
it was
story.
just being born, right?
Yeah, it was just being
Daniel
born.
Defoe, Henry Fielding, so on.
Okay. Yeah. So, but here again is like a story. It's not this, that we can just see, wow, that makes sense. You know, I can do that in my life. And that's, you know, again, one of the many things, abolition of slavery, pro reason, pro freedom, pro tolerance, religious tolerance, you know,
Separation
free
of church and
thought,
state.
separation, you know, all of these things in the 1700s, coming out of the, you know, Louis the 14th, the Sun, you know, the Sun King era, and just a transformation within the
Yes,
span of 83 years.
yes. It's one thing to do this in the English-speaking world, where you've pointed out a number of times there was always a greater emphasis on freedom and the development of individual rights. Not an accident. Took place in Britain,
Yeah,
17th and 18th century. But Voltaire did it in France, you know,
right.
under the ancient regime. Not the constitutional monarchy that was developing, you know, in Britain and you know,
Hmm.
where there was much greater liberty in France, where it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think we're ready to salute the courage, you know,
Yes.
the integrity, the accomplishments of the great man,
Mhm.
the determined little thing, as his family called
Yeah,
him when he was young.
he was.
Yeah, given his basically small and slight physical stature, you know, we could call him by the same nickname that Edward H. Harriman was known as, and that is the Little Giant.
Little
He
giant,
may have been
yes.
he may have been little physically, but he's a giant, intellectually,
Hmm.
morally, spiritually, and
Yeah.
and even the great historian Will Durant,
Hmm.
Story of Civilization, Volume 9.
The Age of Voltaire.
The Enlightenment is encapsulated by Durant as the Age of Voltaire. So
Hmm.
thank you.
Great.
Thank you
Yes.
for, you know, for risking your life to bring, you know, this principled commitment to reason and to liberty and to civilization, in contrast to Rousseau, advanced civilization, like you said, to
Yeah.
reason, high culture, advanced civilization, liberty, and individual rights to France and to the European continent.
Hmm.
Uh, and so we could certainly be
Great.
inspired by Voltaire's courage and his dedication and his genius to
Mhm.
to cultivate our own gardens,
That's
you know,
right.
and be the best
Yes.
we can be.
Right.
All
See
right,
you next
everybody.
time.
Yeah, we will be back next week on the Hero Show with stories of more great men and women to inspire us to be the best version of ourselves. So, in the meantime, everybody, let's try and lead a more heroic life. See you next week.